This one has been on the back burner for a while. That wasn't my intention, but things happen. I did not grow up reading Artemis, but I was aware of it. When it was announced that the book would get a movie adaptation, there was hype for it, and when the film was released, it was ripped apart mercilessly, and this one YouTuber, Nando v Movies, gives a very convincing explanation on why the film turned out the way it did. I very much recommend giving it a watch. With that said, let me explain Artemis Fowl real quick. The book version has Artemis committing crimes because he's bored. Sound familiar? The movie goes the more traditional route and creates a conflict forcing Artemis to commit the crimes he does. Normally, I just watch the movie and edit things here and there to balance out the story, but for this one, I also read the book and ultimately decided to use the book's plot as my guide. By doing this, I will be using the original character description, so please do not take offense by the changing of some of the characters' ethnicities if you've only watched the movie. With that said, let's get started. A waiter arrives at a table to check on the customer, but Artemis makes it clear he's not fooled and urges his informant not to waste his time. The informant begrudgingly sits, and Artemis wastes no time with small talk and gets to the point. Where's the ferry? Not too far from here, but I first want to talk about the payment we had originally discussed. You will get what we agreed upon, and not a penny more, despite the outcome. But I want to make something clear to you. Don't, under any circumstances, underestimate me. The informant is unsure if this was meant to be a threat. Before he can speak, Artemis gives him one chance only to call off whatever trap he had previously arranged. The informant quickly denies the allegations, but Artemis insists that he do it quickly before it's too late. Dumbfounded, the informant doesn't know what to make of the situation but runs out of time as his phone rings. He hesitantly answers, and an unknown voice informs him that the man he hired has been subdued and he'll be next if he tries anything else. The call ends and the informant is left petrified at the smiling boy sitting across from him. The informant leads Artemis to where he previously last saw the ferry. When he looks over his shoulder, he's terrified to find a man falling behind Artemis. There's no doubt who he is. When they reach the spot, the ferry is nowhere in sight, which has the informant nervous, but to his relief, Artemis finds her. Artemis greets her and asks her for a book, which she denies having. He glances at the empty bottles that reflects her shame. Artemis shows her a bottle of whiskey that he'll exchange for the book, if only for a few moments. She hesitantly agrees, believing he wouldn't get any use out of it since it's written in a language unknown to man. With the book in his possession, he wastes no time and quickly starts scanning the pages. He calls Juliet and she confirms that the data is being sent back to his computer. When he's finished, he gives the sprite back her book and a bottle. When you're tired of living like this, take it and it'll take away your craving. With their business finished, the informant is paid and the two leave to board their plane back home. I would have never believed that magic actually existed along with fairies. She was a sprite, and I told you when we started you would need to be more open-minded. That's the downfall of growing up. Despite your intelligence, you are still a child and still possess that innocence necessary to believe. That was the introduction of Artemis Fowl. The film took this completely out, and I can kinda understand why. In the book, he tortures the sprite by poisoning her, but I rewrote it in a way showing that they could have kept it in without Artemis being too malicious for a 12-year-old. The book does show him being sympathetic towards her by giving her injections, which can be a bit too much for a kid film. My rewrite shows his compassion by giving her the option without any strings attached. Another thing that the film did poorly was portraying Artemis's high intellect, meaning there was a lack of it. All the research that Artemis did in the book was done prior in the film by his father, meaning Artemis was given a cheat sheet instead of creating one himself. Upon returning home, Artemis wastes no time. He gets to work decrypting the strange lettering in the sprite's book. However, the disturbing sounds from down the hall keeps breaking his focus. He makes his way downstairs to his father's study. Juliet comes up from behind carrying a tray of expensive china that has been completely shattered. She hesitantly informs him that today was not a good day. Artemis silently thinks to himself, when has there ever been a good day? Juliet sheepishly suggests that a visit from him could help. Artemis says nothing and continues to make his way to his father's study, where he remained for the next couple of days, as he decrypts the book and learns interesting secrets about the fairy world. One thing in particular catches his eye that he previously was aware of but was unsure if it was true or not. Now that it's confirmed that it's real, it'll take a lot for him to possess it. Finally finished with the book, Artemis hands Butler a list of items necessary for the next stage of his plan. In the book, Artemis's father was already missing and his mother was still with him. Unfortunately, she's not in her right mind due to the disappearance of his father. While troubled by his mother's condition, he exploits it, and the filmmakers obviously thought that this was problematic and that's why they drastically changed the story. But they didn't have to go as far as they did, because at the end of the book, it's revealed that Artemis had a second motive that kinda explains why he did what he did, but it was somewhat poorly written, which I will address later. If the filmmakers had used a second ulterior motive, motive from the book like they should have, it would have easily portrayed Artemis as the sympathetic hero that they clearly wanted him to be. I don't want to read too much into this, but I feel that there was some bias in them swapping out Artemis's mentally ill mother that he has to take care of with a father that he admires and wants approval from, which he kinda already seems to have. Let's just move on. Chaos ensues in Italy as a lone elf, Holly Shorts, does her best to keep the situation under control until backup arrives, but her commanding officer keeps hounding her to fall back, which distracts her. The troll swipes her out of the air and Holly throws a gas tank hoping to knock it out, but his tusk punctures the tank, causing a spectacular explosion, which inadvertently does knock it out. Holly throws a spear at the frightened crowd, which knocks them all out. She slumps to the floor as she waits for retrieval and undoubtedly a good chewing from her commanding officer, Root. As she predicted, Root scolds her for breaking protocol, ignoring his orders, and for allowing her magic to run dry. He keeps reminding her that because she's the first female in recon, all eyes are on her and every mistake will be scrutinized. Once he's done berating her, he hints at a compliment saying that it could have been worse. With her part done, Root orders her to go and replenish her magic. The book and the film introduces Holly at headquarters, which introduces the fairy world as she makes her way to her job, but I wanted to do something different. Film-wise, I think it would have been an interesting transition from Artemis at his desk to Holly on the job, because up till now, things have been kinda slow and continue to be slow as the fairy world is introduced. But by seeing Holly in action first and only being exposed to a few fairy creatures, this would create a desire to want to see her world. I feel that a lot of films struggle with overexposing the audience to a world that they have yet to become invested in, because often you have to get them invested in the characters first. Artemis is starting to show discouragement after months of staking out an oak tree, but finally their patience is about to pay off. Holly arrives at the mighty oak, but before she can begin the ritual, senses that she's not alone. Focused on the man in front of her, she failed to notice Artemis behind her, who shoots her with a dart after accidentally missing her the first time. Holly's almost instantly knocked out, but not before catching a glimpse of Artemis. Butler carries the unconscious elf, but Artemis knows something on her wrist. He inspects it, and when he realizes what it is, he instructs Butler that they'll be making a detour. Not much to say about this one. I didn't like the film version. It was a bit comedic that Butler misses Holly when she's not that far away, but miraculously hits her when she's twice if not 3 times the distance away. I know she bends down to pick up an acorn, but still. However, there is a reason for this scene being in the video, so bear with me. Back at headquarters, Foley informs Root that Holly has not returned. They track her signal and are shocked at her current location. They bring up the video feed from her helmet and their worst fears are confirmed. They get their best retrieval officers and waste no time as they close in on Holly's signal. Root goes down first since the culprits seem knowledgeable of their kind. He finds Holly's tracker and realizes he's been had, as a remote voice speaks, introducing himself as Artemis Fowl. Root spots the bomb, but it's too late. However, confetti flies out, which infuriates Root, and he instructs Foley to find all he can about Artemis Fowl. Artemis is an arrogant little prick, and this bit in the book shows it very well. Instead of just letting them track Holly to his home, he instead toys with them first because he's a child. The film cuts this out. Obviously, he's being too malicious because of the bomb, but again, it's not that hard to tone down the problem areas to make it more accessible to children. Who doesn't like confetti? Holly wakes to a blinding headache. She hears noise and Juliet apologizes for disturbing her, but given how long she's been asleep, figured that she'd be hungry when she woke up. Holly assaults her with a slew of questions. Juliet assures her that no harm will come to her and that Artemis will reveal all when the time is right. Before any more words can be exchanged, Juliet's pager goes off, which is only used for emergencies. She runs up the stairs and finds Butler. Artemis is in his mother's room and immediately Juliet's relieved and excited that finally mother and son are speaking again, but the expression on Butler's face said differently. Artemis stayed silent as he watched his mother play make-believe. It took everything in him not to grab her and shake the sanity back into her, but there was no cure for what she had. Artemis did his best to play along, and when his role was done, stormed out of the room, vowing that until his business was done, he would not step back into that room again. Similar to I Kill Giants and A Monster Calls, it's devastating and even traumatizing for a child to have to witness their parental figure get sick, which often forces the roles to be reversed between parent and child. When this happens, that's when the supernatural part of the story kicks in to assist a child in coping and helping them accept the inevitable. However, Artemis Fowl is different. He has the means necessary to change the outcome of his story, and that is his motive in this rewrite. As the drug wears off, Holly carefully inspects her prison and notices the cement is still fresh. She feels something in her shoe and smiles a devilish grin. Someone enters the room, but no introductions need to be made. Artemis's presence alone tells her that he's her captor. However, despite his cold demeanor, it's clear that he's bothered by something. Holly wonders if this has anything to do with what happened earlier. Artemis skips the pleasantries and begins his manipulation to have Holly inadvertently confirm everything he decrypted from the book is correct. He grins as the conversation goes exactly as planned, but Holly refuses to allow him to control the conversation any longer. Juliet was very nice, but she seemed rather troubled when her beeper went off. Was everything all right? Artemis said nothing, but Holly saw a twitch which gave her the confidence to continue. I only asked because, despite the confidence you put on, it was clear you were bothered by something. Artemis clenched his fists as he hated when people could see through his facade. It was obvious that she touched a nerve and gladly continued. For your sake, I hope it turned out all right. Because you picked a fight that's going to need your full attention. This is no child's game. For your sake, let's hope not. After all, children likes to pull wings off of butterflies. I wanted the conversation between Holly and Artemis to come off as a tug-of-war for control because he who controls the conversation has the power. In both the book and film, Artemis mostly controls the conversations. Holly attempts to take control at first with her eyes, but when that doesn't work, in the book, she tries to scare Artemis and kinda takes some control. As for the film, they actually have 3 conversations. The first 2 is Artemis taunting Holly and not really having much of a conversation with her, but the third one was an unnecessary info dump, so Holly and Artemis could relate to one another, which would lead them to trusting each other and becoming friends. Hard pass on that. Artemis and Butler carefully watch the monitors for movement on the property. Seeing something, Artemis switches the modes on the cameras, revealing their guests have arrived. He sends Butler to greet them. Butler wastes no time incapacitating the elf soldiers and leaves one conscious to relay a message. When Root receives the message, he leaves to meet Artemis face to face, as well prepared as he can be. The meeting between the two doesn't last long, as Artemis makes his demands known and refuses to negotiate. Despite Artemis appearing to be holding all the cards, Root only humored the meeting to distract Artemis so Foley can hack into the system without being detected, so Mulch can dig his way into the manor without being captured by the cameras. With the meeting concluded, Root returns to the airship and Foley informs him that the plan was a success. However, a new obstacle unnecessarily appears. An old acquaintance arrives to take over the mission. When Root refuses, Cudgens flaunts a signed document stating that he's in charge now. When it's revealed that Cudgens plans to release the troll they captured earlier in the manor, Foley quickly warns Mulch, but he's too distracted with trying to break into a safe he found. When he opens it, he finds a copy of their book, which he snatches. He hears someone coming up the stairs after him and releases the excessive air within him, knocking Butler down the stairs and knocking him unconscious. Mulch makes for a hasty getaway, seeing this as his only chance to escape all the parties involved. There was a lot happening in the book, and I did my best to condense it but still have it make sense. I've only read the first book, so I don't know the significance of Mulch's character, so I skimmed over him. As for Root, I feel like he's smarter than he lets on, and that's why I rearranged the order of events, and I could just be overestimating him. Originally in the book, Root sees Cudgens as a trusted friend, even though he's continuously warned about him. The thing is, Cudgens doesn't hesitate to throw Root under the bus the first chance he gets and take control himself. I can't help but wonder, how did Root not see this behavior in him in his early years when it's pretty obvious that everyone else knew what Cudgens was really like? Clearly, I changed Cudgens' introduction because his character is more interesting when he's allowed to be the backstabbing narcissist that he is. Artemis heard the explosion from Mulch but couldn't find it on the cameras and can't contact Butler. At that moment, he realized that he's been had. He quickly reboots the system and reevaluates the situation but doesn't have time to act, as he discovers that Holly has an acorn and has dug through the cement. He contacts Juliet to dart Holly before she can leave the room. Holly takes out the cameras and Juliet cautiously enters ready to shoot, but Holly jumps her. Disarming Juliet, she pulls off her glasses, but Juliet keeps her eyes closed. The two struggle for some time as both refuse to relent. Finally, Holly manages to subdue Juliet and orders her to sleep. Holly makes her way through the house to find Artemis. Up the stairs, she finds the unconscious Butler and is careful not to wake him. She opens doors until she finds Artemis, and a thunderous roar echoes through the house. Holly recognizes the roar as it wakes Butler, and he radios in asking about the situation. Artemis checks the cameras and informs Butler that the infrared is picking up something massive in the basement where Juliet was last seen. Butler wastes no time for orders as he storms his way through the basement. Holly is furious at the turn of events, how she wished to have paid Artemis back for his hospitality, but she is still an officer of the LEP. She turns to look at Artemis, who has a grin on his face, believing him to be safe, but Holly too has a grin on her face. She punches him and leaves to deal with the troll again. I don't know much about Juliet's character besides her being portrayed as a bit of an airhead. However, she deserves a moment to shine too, showing that she has value and isn't just a servant. The book makes it apparent that she does have interest in hand-to-hand combat, and the film shows her being trained by Butler, but neither versions does anything with this information. In the book, Juliet is Butler's sister, but in the film, she's his niece. I don't know how deep the book goes in exploring their relationship, so I don't know if changing their relations will cripple or change their development or interactions, so I don't address it. It's honestly satisfying to know that Holly gets a hit on this little prick in both the book and the film. By the time Holly reaches the basement, Butler has already made contact with the troll and is losing. She joins the fight and the two do their best not to get in each other's way as they take down the troll. Miraculously, they appear to be winning until Holly slips on blood and is about to be violently gored, but Butler pushes her out of the way and takes it himself. He falls to the floor, bloodied. Juliet finally wakes and is horrified to see Butler in the state that he is in. Holly does her best to fend off the troll, but it isn't enough and is thrown. Juliet stands ready to fight despite her still groggy condition. Holly drags herself to Butler to heal him. The troll lets out a roar ready to charge, but it's nicked on the shoulder. Artemis stands at the doorway holding Holly's gun. Artemis has a track record of being a terrible shot. Juliet shoots until the gun is empty, but that was enough time for Holly to heal Butler. He stands and for once gives Artemis orders. He takes on the weakened beast alone. Artemis gets Holly as Juliet takes the bag of detonators he brought with him and sets them up. When she's done, she throws the trigger to Butler, who lures the troll where he wants him and pulls the trigger. To the relief of all, Butler exhaustively walks away. This fight was violent, but clearly necessary because it puts all the characters on even ground. I did change a few things from the book. I wanted it to be a group effort including Artemis and Juliet, but didn't want to take the spotlight away from Butler either because this scene implements just what an absolute badass this guy is. However, it didn't make sense that the troll didn't do damage to someone while Holly was healing Butler. That's why I added Artemis assisting and why I added the earlier scene with the oak tree, foreshadowing that Artemis is a terrible shot. This addition is also setting up for another change I made in the next scene. With the troll dealt with, Artemis sends out a message through Holly's helmet while she's still recovering. It was time to pay up. Cudgeons is fuming as his plan failed as Root takes back control since he lost possession of the troll, and gives the orders to deliver the gold. A trolley arrives and Holly too was curious. Butler opens it and the sight was spectacular. Artemis orders the butlers to unload the gold. Holly still despises Artemis, but his butlers didn't deserve what was coming and urged Artemis to surrender. After everything I put your people through, you really think they won't seek restitution? It's better than being dead. I'm touched by your concern, but it has to end this way. Why? What do you gain out of all this chaos you've created besides a couple of gold bars that you're not going to be able to spend in the afterlife? The gold was a well-calculated bonus, but I finally met all the requirements to gain my true prize. Requirements? Are you saying you did all this for a wish? I saved your life. You owe me. The hell I do! You're lucky I don't break your sorry neck after everything you put me through. Artemis recites a passage from the book that reminds Holly that she cannot decline his wish. She grits her teeth and demands to know the wish. What he said was nothing near what Holly expected. She still despises him, but slightly less now. When it's done, Holly is safely delivered to the airship where she watches as the bomb is launched and the house is stormed, but only got a glimpse of Artemis before the elves had to run back out of the house. The negative reaction they all had can only be explained by the owner of the home not being dead. Holly gives a sigh of relief and vows to get him back one day. The elves leave and Artemis sluggishly wakes with his loyal butlers beside him. He explains to them how they escaped death but didn't get to finish as someone comes down the stairs. They all stare at the lady of the house as she gave out coherent orders for once. The butlers obey, but Artemis remained where he is, still unsure if his wish worked. She makes her way to him, holds him tight, and apologizes for being gone for so long. Near the end of the book, Artemis out of nowhere asks Holly how much a wish would cost. There was no foreshadowing or prior mention of this ability that I can recall. Not to mention, after everything Artemis has done to Holly, I don't know why she would even humor the idea of giving him a wish. She doesn't know that he was bluffing about drugging her for 3 days. He gives her half the gold in exchange for the wish, but does she get to keep it or does the LEP take it back? And if that's the case, what the hell does she get out of it? If there was just a little mention of this earlier in the book, then perhaps it wouldn't have felt like a last-minute add-in. When it comes to this film, I don't know what I can say that hasn't already been addressed. Mistakes were made and the film suffered for it. Most likely there won't be a sequel, but after a decade or two, maybe Disney will give Artemis another try, or some other studio might buy the rights to Artemis and give their interpretation of it. When adapting books into film, there will always be changes for better or worse. But when the changes are drastic like what happened with this film, it leaves a bad taste in my mouth. Writers put a lot of work and a lot of hours in creating and bringing to life these stories, and when they're drastically altered and changed, it just feels like a slap in the face. But regardless, if you like this film, good. I'm happy that someone appreciates the hard work that was put into this film. Whether a film is good or not, it still needs to be appreciated because hard work was put into that as well. Whatever the case, lovers of Artemis will still have the books to comfort them. Thanks for watching, and like and subscribe.